He once told a friend, casually, that his ex-wife had been an actress on a legal drama called Suits. The friend had never heard of the show and certainly didn't recognize the name Meghan Markle. Months slipped by, and then the news broke everywhere. The same woman was marrying Prince Harry. Suddenly the dots connected. She hadn't managed to land the heir to the throne. She had settled, temporarily, for the Spare's older brother. No, wait. She had married the Spare himself after first being married to someone else entirely. The internet exploded with 1,000 think pieces, but long before Trevor Engelson ever opened his mouth publicly, his own family and friends had watched the entire movie play out in slow motion. They had seen it from the very beginning. For almost 10 years, they bit their tongues while their son, brother, and friend poured everything he had into a woman who, they quietly believed, was already scanning the horizon for the next, bigger ship. They watched him twist himself into knots, cancel plans, fly red-eye flights, send care packages, rearrange his career, anything to keep the marriage alive, while she, even then, seemed to be keeping one foot out the door. They weren't petty or jealous. They were heartbroken and helpless. And eventually, after the divorce, after the royal wedding, after the births of 2 children he had once been told could never exist, Trevor finally began, carefully, quietly, to let the truth surface. This is that story. Not gossip for gossip's sake, but a cautionary tale about loving someone who never saw you as the destination, only the departure lounge. Trevor Engelson is not a household name, and he never wanted to be. He's a producer, the kind who makes films and television happen behind the camera, far from red carpets and screaming headlines. He met Meghan in 2004. They dated for 7 years, married in 2011, and divorced in 2013, citing the usual irreconcilable differences. To the outside world, it looked like yet another Hollywood marriage that couldn't survive distance and ambition. But distance and ambition don't begin to cover what actually happened. From the earliest days, the people closest to Trevor noticed the balance was off. He was all in, she was already halfway out. He celebrated her successes as though they were his own. He flew to Toronto every chance he got while she filmed Suits, squeezing visits into the tiny windows between her 16-hour shooting days and his own workload in Los Angeles. He sent gifts, letters, food, little reminders that she was loved even when oceans of geography and schedules separated them. He researched moving production companies north of the border so the distance would stop mattering. He did everything a devoted partner is supposed to do and more, and in return, less and less. It wasn't cruel or dramatic. That would have been easier to spot and stop. It was gradual, almost polite, a slow dimming of emotional availability. Phone calls returned later and later. Texts became shorter. When he talked about the future, she smiled and changed the subject. Friends watched him paint vivid pictures of the life they would build together while she nodded along, eyes already focused on a horizon he couldn't see. Her career was skyrocketing, and every rung on the ladder seemed to push him a little further into shadow. Then came the conversation that rewrote everything. One night, in what should have been an intimate, vulnerable moment, Meghan told Trevor she could not have children. It wasn't presented as a maybe or a perhaps one day. It was delivered as a movable fact. For many couples, that news is devastating, life-altering. Trevor's response was immediate and unconditional. Okay. We'll build a different life. Just us. Travel, work, freedom, no diapers, no school runs, no minivan. He let go of the dream of fatherhood without anger or negotiation because he loved her and believed her. He reshaped his entire vision of the future around the truth she had given him. Years later, when she announced her first pregnancy with Prince Harry, followed quickly by a second, the betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet and crushing. All those sacrifices, all those readjusted dreams, had been built on information that turned out to be either mistaken or deliberately untrue. Friends say Trevor didn't rage. He simply stared at the news and felt the floor drop out from under a decade of his life. If the one foundational truth she had asked him to accept turned out to be temporary, or worse, strategic, what else had been performance? That was the moment the whole marriage refracted into something else entirely. Suddenly, every lopsided gesture, every canceled plan of his own, every excited monologue about our future that had been met with a polite smile made chilling sense. His family's quiet worries weren't paranoia, they were pattern recognition. The care packages he sent that went barely acknowledged, the red-eye flights that felt more like interruptions than reunions, the way her ambition always seemed to point past him rather than with him, it all clicked into place. She hadn't been growing away from him because fame changed her. She had always been moving toward something else, and he had simply been the relationship that coincided with the audition phase. By the time the divorce papers were signed in 2013, the split felt almost anticlimactic. There was no explosive fight, no public scandal, just a quiet dissolution that left him exhausted rather than angry. What hurt wasn't the legal end, it was how little the end seemed to register with her. To Trevor, an entire chapter of his life was closing in flames. To her, it appeared to be nothing more than the turning of a page. And then the world watched her do it again, only this time on a global stage. The pattern repeated itself with eerie precision. Intense early attachment, gradual isolation from the partner's previous support system, the slow recasting of the man's identity around her goals, and finally, when those goals were within reach, the calm, almost relieved exit. Different man, different postcode, vastly different stakes, yet the choreography looked disturbingly familiar. Trevor has never trashed her publicly. He's rebuilt his life, stayed out of the spotlight, and by all accounts carries himself with dignity. But those who know him say the wound never fully closed. How could it? He didn't just lose a wife. He lost the entire narrative he had believed about their love. He discovered, too late, that he had been a supporting character in someone else's story, loved, perhaps, in the moment he was useful, but never essential. That is the part that lingers, the realization that the person you rearranged your soul for considered you disposable. You fly across continents carrying hope in your suitcase. You abandon dreams of children because she said it was impossible. You tell yourself the emotional distance is temporary, and then you watch her step effortlessly into the exact future she once swore could never happen, with someone else who now believes every promise you once did. Trevor's story matters not because it's royal-adjacent gossip, but because versions of it are playing out right now in apartments and houses around the world. Someone is flying red-eye to keep a fading relationship alive. Someone is letting go of lifelong dreams because their partner insists it's impossible. Someone is making excuses for emotional absence, telling themselves, once things calm down, once the promotion happens, once the kids/no kids/career move is settled, they'll turn back toward me. And when they don't, when the person you loved, with everything quietly steps into the next chapter without you, the pain isn't just heartbreak. It's the vertigo of realizing the ground you built your life on was never solid to begin with. That is what Trevor Engelson lived through. That is what his family saw coming a decade before the rest of us ever heard the name Meghan Markle. And that is why, all these years later, when people ask him about the past, he doesn't spew venom. He simply looks tired. Because some betrayals aren't loud or dramatic. Some are quiet, methodical, and devastatingly efficient, over before you even realize the game was rigged from the start.